I'll give you my take. Absolutely not. No, you just don't sell your best player. Well, hello again, guys, and welcome back to the main streets of Gosforth. Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks. I feel like I need the full fortnight to go back over everything that's happened. We haven't got that time, but buckle up for a bumper edition now. I've been with Eddie Howe at the training ground this morning. There's an awful lot to go over in terms of what he said and to retrace events, like I say, of the past fortnight, when an awful lot has happened without anything actually really happening. Now, to help me, because there is an awful lot to go over, I've got my Inter Milan notepad, and I'm also wearing my Bayern Munich gloves. Now, are there hidden meanings behind that, or does it just mean that I'm cold and forgetful? I think it's more of the latter. But before I do forget any more of what Eddie Howe said this morning, now, yeah, we'll start on incomings. Like I say, we've got incomings, we've got outgoings, we've got injuries, we've got contracts, and by the way, we've also got a football match down at Fulham tomorrow, and a very important one at that. But yes, first of all, because I think it's probably what you guys want to know most about, who is coming into Newcastle United this month? No one. Well, no one as it stands, that is, because the deals Newcastle are trying to manufacture at the moment, and we'd reported this previously, are loans with an obligation or an option to buy, and there'll be no loan fee involved. If nobody goes out, all Newcastle can really afford to do, because they're at the limit of FFP, for example, what they were looking at with regards to Calvin Phillips was to pay nothing now, but then to have an obligation which they would have to then meet in the summer, because, like I say, there is no wiggle room. Darren Eales made that clear when he spoke to us earlier in the month. We'll revisit the consequences of that message in just a moment, and whether it was a good thing or whether it was a bad thing. But yeah, who is coming in? Now, we know some of the players they're looking at. We know what they want. They want a left-sided midfielder, someone in the mould of Joelinton. Now, there's a name we're going to come back to. Yeah, it isn't the number 6 Eddie Howe is after. He thinks that when his midfield is functioning properly, it negates the need for the number 6. The number 6 I've spent all season talking about, and everyone else is now too. I'm not saying I was first there, but yeah, I did mention it on the opening day. Anyway, that's getting sidetracked. Yeah, they want a left-sided midfielder in the mould of Joelinton. Now, names one I know they are looking at and have looked at, been admirers for a while now, is Philip Billing down at Bournemouth. I know Anana's been mentioned as well at Everton. He's a player they've watched for a while. Now, how do you do those sorts of deals in January? With great difficulty, without any money, unless the club you're buying from, like I say, agrees to that sort of deal whereby it is a zero cost now and you pay down the line. How can that change? Well, it can change with outgoings, because if you bring in a player, and the way it works with FFP, you've only really got to sell a player for 10, 15, 20 million pound, and then that, because of the amortisation, that then actually gives you room to perhaps go out and buy a player for 30, 40, 50 million. So we'll have to wait and see on that. It would take an outgoing for the domino effect in terms of a player coming in of that nature. But what did Eddie Howe say this morning? Well, it was pretty gloomy, really, if you're reading it as a Newcastle supporter. He said to us they are not currently active. He said, yes, they are preparing, they are assessing all options, but as it stands, he pretty much said no one would be coming in. That brings us now on to outgoings, and yeah, we're 3 minutes into this video. I think I could take up the next 33 talking about outgoings, even though no one has gone. Oh, sorry, Javier Manquillo, he has left the building. Now, the only place to start on this one is with Kieran Trippier. And again, the caveat here with all of the information I'm about to give you over the next 10, 15 minutes or so is that there's a lot of competing agendas in January transfer windows. It's at times not easy for a reporter, but you always believe and report what you believe to be true, and certainly what I believe, what I'm going to tell you now, I firmly believe to be the case, and I'll try and explain to the best of my ability why that is so. Now, Kieran Trippier, to go back 7, 8 days, whatever it was, there was word of interest from Bayern Munich. It quickly became apparent that interest was genuine. Now, on Saturday, and I spent all day Saturday, it was a rare day off, in a soft play on my phone, trying to keep one eye on kids. Yeah, that was an interesting day, but nonetheless, yeah, it became apparent the interest was genuine. Kieran Trippier was open to the move, but Newcastle were going to make were resisting all attempts to sell him. Now, the offer they received on Saturday, I believe, and again, you can't be totally sure on timings, you just go off when you get the information into you. The initial approach, and it was described as an approach to begin with, was for a loan move. Now, quite why Bayern Munich thought they could get Kieran Trippier on loan, I don't know. That was rebuffed very quickly. Then at some point over the weekend, they came back with what I'm told was a low ball offer. Now, low ball I don't know, somewhere between £5 and £10 million. Then on Tuesday was what turned out to be the final offer, which was €15 million, £12.8 million. Now, by this point, Newcastle sources were saying he will not be sold. He is going nowhere. I spoke to someone earlier in the week who went as far as to use the word guarantee Kieran Trippier will be at Newcastle come the end of the window. Newcastle stood firm on that. The offer was rejected. Buying came out the following day. They admitted their pursuit was over. Now, this brings us on to what Eddie said this morning. He had to make the point that at no point had Kieran Trippier agitated to go. He was fully committed to Newcastle. Now, does that mean Kieran Trippier didn't want to go and never wanted to go? I think both things can be true. And what I'm trying to say is that, yes, Kieran Trippier's conduct through it all was professional. He communicated to Newcastle. He's got a fantastic relationship with Eddie, with his teammates, with the owners. He is happy here. Everything he's got with the supporters, with you guys, with the club, the transformative nature of his signing. Everything is there. There were no real push factors in terms of Newcastle United, but there was an attraction to Bayern Munich. I'm pretty confident. I feel I'm on pretty safe ground in saying that based on the information that I've got. Evidenced by the fact that Bayern Munich came back with 3 offers. You don't come back in for a player, 3 times if you don't believe there isn't a willingness there. Now, the German press were even reporting the terms had been agreed with Trippier. I don't know if it went that far, but I do believe there were certainly conversations and representations made. So yeah, they were given encouragement that if Newcastle were to accept an offer, there could have been movement. Now, Newcastle didn't accept an offer, and Trippier said, okay, that's the end of it. Good, happy. I'm, happy to stay, fully committed, and of course he will be. Now, should Newcastle have accepted the offer? I know there's an argument out there that in an FFP world that you can make an argument for selling a 33-year-old with 18 months on his contract if they could have got somewhere north of 15, where we believe Bayern might have gone to in the end. I'll give you my take. Absolutely not. No, you just don't sell your best player. You really don't. And I honestly believe Kieran Trippier is that to Newcastle. Now, yes, 15, 20 million pound for all of those numbers and reasons I've just listed might make sense to a degree, but it's still only 15 to 20 million pound for the player who, for me, has the biggest impact on your football team. I just think to sell Trippier, to let him go, would have been absolutely nonsensical. Newcastle would have lost far more games without him than I'm tying myself up knots there. You know what I'm trying to say. Newcastle would have been worse off without Kieran Trippier going forward for the rest of the season. And Eddie Howe, if we're looking at it from his perspective, he's got to think in the isolation of, yes, there is a bigger club picture there, but he's got to keep his job for the rest of the season. And while there is no, I've communicated that to you guys before in terms of, I believe there is no threat to Eddie's position, and nor should there be. But, he still can't go and lose the next 5-10 matches, whatever it is. To that end, having Kieran Trippier gives him a better chance of winning games. So for him, it was imperative to keep him. And I was thinking, it really does make a statement that they've held off. The club is huge and as big as Bayern Munich. People all over the world wear their gloves. They're an incredible club. I can understand why Trippier might have been drawn to that prospect, but at the same time, for Newcastle to say no, you're not having our captain, our vice captain, our best player, and telling them to go away, I think that does make a statement, and I think it was a very important one for them to make. Okay, next up, how long we got? Callum Wilson. Now, this was a story I broke in the Mail on Saturday night. Again, I was in that soft play when I took a call about Callum Wilson and an offer which had gone in from Atletico Madrid. Now, I had that confirmed, I had that stood up. Yes, an offer had gone in. It was a loan offer earlier in the week, but it was very quickly rejected. Now, would Atletico return with a permanent? We were led to believe they might, but again, they're bound by FFP restraints. That didn't happen. There was interest from Milan. Now, I don't think the interest from Milan was ever went further, or at least it hasn't yet, as anything more than a conversation. I don't know whether that will go anywhere, but now, domestically, there's interest in Callum Wilson. We'll get to why shortly. West Ham have been credited with an interest. I know now I've got a little bit of information on the Chelsea situation. From what I believe, Chelsea, Mauricio Pochettino looks at Wilson as an option, someone who would come in short term, but doesn't fit the club's model. So I think, yes, he is one they are monitoring if he was to be available, if there was a deal to do there, but certainly I don't think he's a priority for Chelsea as of now. But is he on their long list? Yes, he is. But what is the situation with Wilson and Newcastle? Now, Eddie was asked about this morning, and He likened it to the situation with Trippier, and that all of his conversations with Callum Wilson is 100% committed to Newcastle. He said, he was asked a question about Wilson being offered around, and he said, no, but that would make absolutely no sense. Why would the club do that? And yeah, I fully agree with Eddie. They've got one fit striker at the moment, and Alexander Isak. Why would they try and get rid of the one who was coming back to fitness, and Callum Wilson? Now, for all of that, I do believe, and this is based on my own reading of the situation and information I've got elsewhere, if there was an offer to come in now with 6 days of the window to go, and it was a decent offer for Callum Wilson, what we're talking 15-20 million pounds, my information is that I believe Newcastle would be open to looking at that. Listen, the official line I'm getting back is that he's not for sale this month. They want to keep him. Nonetheless, like I say, you've got information coming from here, there and everywhere, and you put it all together and you make a judgment based on the people you trust and what you've heard. And I honestly think with Wilson, there might be movement. I think there is I wouldn't call it a desire from the player, but I think there is perhaps a willingness from the player to move on if the right offer became available, and that is, again, similar to Trippier. Both things can be true. You can be happy, you can be desperate to get back. He wants to come back and score goals, get back in the England squad, help Newcastle. He loves Eddie Howe, he loves the supporters, the club, everything about it. Both things can be true. You can also, if you're a player like Wilson, look at your situation, say 18 months left on your contract, and think, well, if there's 2.5 years on offer elsewhere, it's slightly more money, then why wouldn't you consider that? So where we are on Wilson is, I believe there's nothing concrete as of now yet. I wouldn't completely rule that one out. And it was telling when Eddie gave his answer today, he talked all the words about Wilson and then said at the end, but some things are beyond my control. So I think Wilson is one to keep an eye on. Right, okay, on we go. Miguel Almiron. Now, there was an approach during the week from Saudi club Al Shabab. I believe there's more than one club where conversations, and depending on who you listen to, who are conversations being had with? Is it the club? Is it Almiron's intermediaries? Not quite sure. Is it all of them together? Anyway, an offer came in, and I was told immediately when the offer approach landed that it was a deal that was unlikely, quote, unlikely, and that is because the Saudis weren't offering enough money. I think it was somewhere around sort of 15-16 million pound, I think. And also Almiron preferred to stay anyway. Those two things combined meant it was unlikely. Yet we weren't getting the outright denials that this one wouldn't happen and that Almiron wasn't for sale. As it is, and again, guys, I'm aware that by the time this video goes live, things could actually have moved on, because I do think if Newcastle could sell one player this month, and Eddie Howe said this morning he doesn't want to lose Almiron, and he spoke very effusively about him, I think from a wider club perspective, I think it would be Almiron who goes, especially if they're getting somewhere close to £20 million. Bearing in mind they bought him 5 years ago now, his book price will be close to zero. Almiron, I think, is one who they could sell, and that would then actually enable them to go out and spend potentially a hell of a lot of money on the midfielder or the forward replacement that they want. So I definitely think Almiron is one to keep an eye on, even though the word 72 hours ago was that it was unlikely. I think there's still legs in this one yet. And finally, last but not least, in terms of outgoings, because it's the quickest one to wrap up, and I'm going to have to refer to my Inter Milan notebook to see where we go after this. I've got a few notes. Jamal Lascelles. Now, what I can tell you is Besiktas came in, I think it was back in the summer, and I was told that there was almost a derisory bid of 2-3 million, which Newcastle just dismissed out of hand. Now there's talk of Besiktas being back involved. That seemed like that was news to Eddie Howe today. Certainly when I've gone to check this one out, I've had almost nothing back on it really, in terms of I think it's a little bit of a mystery, all this talk of interest. As it stands now, for me, Lascelles, Newcastle won't let him go. They can't let him go. Eddie Howe says he wants to keep him. But nonetheless, listen, the interest exists, yes, but I don't think this one's going to go anywhere this window. Right, now, we've gone through all the potential incomings, which aren't many. Like I said, the one to keep an eye on, I think, is perhaps Billing down at Bournemouth, even though there are other names on that list. And outgoings, and the one big bit of definitive news we got from Eddie's press conference today, and like I say, when all of us guys sit around at the end chatting about it, and this was lost amid all of the like I said, the noise on transfers, was Joelinton. Now this is a story I broke a week ago. Daily Mail exclusive, and that was that Joelinton could have played his last game for Newcastle. Now, when I broke this story, I made the mistake. I left comments on, the first 7 comments. I realised that could pretty much be summed up as F off. Don't like bad news. Some folk do that. I very quickly realised that Twitter X couldn't be trusted with that sort of information, so turned the comments off, which I never like. I never like to do, to be honest with you. If you want a cheerleader who just tells you what you want, go somewhere else. I'll tell you what I think is real, and what I think is real, and what we now know to be real, is that Joelinton's contract situation is a serious one. And I'll tell you what I know. I'll tell you what I think will happen. So what I know, and this is what we reported at the time, is that Joelinton's got 18 months left on his deal. He's currently asking for wages that would make him the best paid player at the club. Now, the hierarchy don't want to do that. They don't want to. You've got 2 issues there. One, from just in the immediacy of it, paying money to a player from an FFP world, that they perhaps haven't budgeted for or can't afford. They just don't want to go that high in terms of what they do give a player. 2, if you do that, and you could argue Joelinton is worth that. I know there's some people inside the club who think just pay it, given in mind how important he is to the team and what a good job he's done. The problem you've got is you've then got 4 or 5 others knocking on the door saying, well, I want parity. So I understand it from the club's perspective. Now, if I was Joelinton, from what I'm led to believe, the money they're actually offering is still very good, and to guys like us, I could afford gloves with fingers on the end if I was paid that sort of money. So it's and because he is pretty much out for the rest of the season, the reason I wrote the story was I was being told, if there is no resolution come the summer and he still hasn't played because of the injury, and like I say, that's you come back in May, but unlikely perhaps he does play again unless they make the FA Cup final. What a send off that would be. They will be forced to sell him. Eddie was asked the question this morning, direct question about it, could Joelinton have played his last game with the club? And he said, while he doesn't want that to be the case, it is a possibility, yes, that the club will, this is Eddie's words, the club will have to sell Joelinton in the summer if there is no resolution with the contract. And at the moment, my understanding, and this was echoed by Eddie today, is that the 2 parties, the 2 sides, are still far apart. Now, what is my take on what I think will happen? Honestly, guys, at the moment, if I was just going off the mood music and the noise I'm getting, I think Joelinton has played his last game on Newcastle. You might not want to hear that, but again, you can only go off the information you've got. And what I got last week was pretty strong, which is why I wrote the story with the conviction I did. And that is, at the moment, they're so far apart that there is no resolution in sight. Now, why might that change? That could change. Well, the injury could actually play a part. Joelinton might look at it and think, I've had this, what is now a serious injury, going to keep him out for a number of months. Is his stock as high? Does he look at the money on offer from Newcastle and think, well, why not sign it here? Or has he had his head turned, which I'm led to believe by 1 or 2 little murmurings of what could be on offer elsewhere? We don't know. This one is one which certainly got legs in it, needs a resolution one way or the other, but it's big news because Joelinton, what I think of him, I just think when he plays, Joelinton and Kieran Trippier last year, the 2 of them were an absolute toss-up for the player of the season. I think I ended up going with Joelinton just for the impact he has on that midfield and the impact he has on others, which Kieran Trippier has as well, by the way. When Kieran Trippier's in the team, I talk about what he brings. He makes about 3 or 4 others on that right-hand side better players. That's why they've got to keep Trippier. That's why I think and I hope they really do keep Joelinton, but at the moment, the noises I'm getting back aren't necessarily positive. And finally, we've still got the game of Fulham to talk about. But finally, fitness news. And I did a little bit of an update during the break, and nothing's really changed since then. Jacob Murphy should be back in the squad tomorrow. Harvey Barnes, Callum Wilson, Joe Willock are all getting closer. It sounds like Tuesday down at Villa might just be a little bit too soon for them. Maybe Wilson could be back. Beyond that, Barnes perhaps next weekend after, and the same for Willock. I think the timeline from what I'm led to believe is Murphy 1, Wilson 2, Barnes 3, Willock 4, and then Anderson 5, who's still got another 4 or 5 weeks out recovering from his back fracture. So that's where we are. A little bit of news. Joe White has come back in. He's cup tied tomorrow. Interesting to see how he does, because he's in, for all intents and purposes, the fourth choice midfielder now. He'll come back into the squad down in Villa. Player I've seen a lot of. So yeah, excited to see how he comes back into it too. Oh, and one other little bit of fitness news that I haven't reported yet, but here you go, YouTube exclusive, which means absolutely nothing really, is that Nick Pope had a little bit of a slight setback, I think, in his recovery from his dislocated shoulder, something to do with a pectoral issue, I think, but nonetheless, it hasn't affected the time frame. He's still on track, I believe, for the April return. So which actually, in terms of the goalkeeping situation, that's gone quiet now. Dubravka is the man in possession. He's doing okay. Newcastle haven't won a lot of games with him in goal. I think only the one, Fulham against 10 men, but certainly at the moment I'm not getting a lot back in terms of Newcastle looking for a goalkeeper. David De Gea was quickly dismissed 4 or 5 weeks ago, so yeah, they'll go forward with Dubravka. Now, I can't even remember if I mentioned this at the top. It seems like so long ago, but Calvin Phillips, Eddie did say this morning that Newcastle were in for him, but they pulled out on grounds of finances, which is going to bring us on to what I'm going to talk about in a second. Now, my understanding on Phillips is, and they reported this a couple of weeks ago, that yes, there was the issue of Newcastle just wouldn't pay that loan fee up front, the £7 million loan fee, but also there were concerns about Phillips in terms of the game time, and they can't have a player coming in. They need someone to come in who hits the ground running now, and Phillips has barely played this season. And I was looking back over it, like, has there ever been so much fuss about a 28-year-old who has had 2 seasons in the Premier League? In effect, and the second one of those with Leeds, he missed a lot of it because of a shoulder injury as well. So for me, I think Phillips going forward, while I've covered him, watched him in England, I think he's a wonderful player. I've covered him at Leeds. I think he's very good, but I do think that was just too big a risk for Newcastle to take, to bring in a 28-year-old with a suspect fitness record, who for 28 he's played 65 Premier League games in his career. 28 and 65 matches. I still think he's got an awful lot to prove, and I think for Newcastle to commit any big degree of money to him on big wages, I think would have been a risk, and I think they've made the right decision in walking away from that one. Now, that does bring me on to all of this talk of FFP, which of course came earlier in the window when we sat down with Darren Eales, and this was a question I asked of Eddie this morning. Eddie had said to us moments before it came to myself to have an exchange with him. He'd said that in an ideal world, it hasn't been ideal. He said it'd been a difficult couple of weeks because of all the interest in his players. Now, I said, well, on the back of that, Eddie, this has come about primarily because of the comments from the club earlier in the window about every player having their price and needing to trade players. I said, to that end, would you have preferred the timing of that media briefing to be at the end of the season? And Eddie said, well, no, it's important that the club are honest and they put the information out there, and he didn't take the bait, so to speak. Now, I wasn't necessarily trying to lead him down a path or in any negative headlines. It was a general, genuine inquiry, because it's sort of something I've been wrestling with myself. Now, I'll answer 2 of my own questions here in terms of, I'll answer the question I asked Eddie, really. Was the timing ideal? At the time, going back to the time, and I did a video on it, it was fine. There was, there's no complaints. I thought Darren Eales spoke well. I thought it was important. We can't go through an era of Mike Ashley and complaining about never communicating and never, telling us journalists what's actually going on and bringing us on the inside, and then Darren Eales does it and we criticise him. I'm not going to do that. I thought what he said made a lot of sense. I thought it was important. That was all good. What we didn't realise at the time is the consequence of it has been that in a month whereby most clubs aren't open for business, Newcastle said they were, and that it has, as a result, invited interest from Bayern Munich. All the stuff about Callum Wilson as well, Jamal Lascelles, Miguel Almiron. So Eddie's words himself were that it wasn't ideal. I know that there are 1 or 2 concerns behind the scenes, that it may have had a little bit of an unsettling effect in terms of the dressing room. Kieran Trippier having this to deal with during the past week, other players looking at it, maybe like a Wilson or others, and thinking, well, is this actually now the time to leave or to explore more options elsewhere? So yeah, not ideal is what I would say. Would it have been, on reflection, again, this is with hindsight, I'll admit that much, would it have been better having that briefing at the end of the season? Perhaps, maybe not. The proof will be in the pudding in terms of how Newcastle come out of this. Maybe it might just have a galvanising effect, and if everyone does stay together, they go forth for the rest of the season. Who knows? We'll wait and see. But where do they go to tomorrow? And it's the not insignificant occurrence of a 4th round tie down at Fulham. I'll be there. Now, why do I say it's not insignificant? I honestly believe out of the next 4 or 5 games, the biggest one for Eddie Howe and for the team is this one here. I just think the optics of having a cup run alive in what I probably believe is going to be a fairly difficult second half of the season, I don't think you can underestimate the importance of that for mood in this city, with you guys, with supporters in the stadium, just having that there. We saw in 90, 98, 99 a cup run allied to a not easy league campaign can act as something of a painkiller. I just think for Newcastle to stay in the FA Cup, even if that is by getting a replay, and the schedule is a little bit lighter now they're out of Europe, if they've got to take it to a replay, so be it. But this one tomorrow night for them is massive. How do you call it? Well, it's difficult. Newcastle are in a bad run. We can't actually get away from that. In terms of the results, it's still the 8 defeats out of 10 since the start of December. There was improvements. I can't remember, what was the last game? Man City. Now, was that long ago? There were real signs there for an hour at least of Newcastle having that fire being reignited inside them on the back of the win at Sunderland. So you've got to hope from a Newcastle perspective that continues down at Fulham tomorrow. They've had an extended period off, a week or so off. They've had a full week now with Eddie on the training pitch, and I always think when they've had that full week, you'd always back them to go in and produce a performance. So yeah, guys, is that just about? I'm just going to consult with my Inter Milan notebooks. If there's anything else I've forgotten. Oh yeah, there is. Alfie Harrison from the guy that I've brought in a player, you see. Alfie Harrison from Manchester City, now for an undisclosed fee, 18-year-old. Eddie was asked about that this morning, said that it wasn't a deal he had anything to do with. Now I believe the undisclosed fee is pretty much zero in terms of all of any potential fee down the line will be dependent on first team involvement, but he's going to go in with the underage group. So But saying that, he's probably one injury away from being on the bench with the first team. So we'll wait and see on that one. Yeah, guys, I think I've talked for long enough now. I'll be getting the train down to Fulham tomorrow. Please say hello if you are there. 7 o'clock kickoff, which gives us a glimmer of hope of getting a pint afterwards. Quick story, I was down in London. It'll be my second visit to London this week. And yeah, I was down covering Chelsea v Middlesbrough on Tuesday night. And, I always think you've got to look after your future self. So I've got myself I've said this before on this channel, London, the city that never sleeps, yet all the pubs shut at 11 o'clock. So I've got myself a couple of beers. When you finish work, it's pretty intense, all the video, all the different demands now. Best job in the world, but you do come out of these stadiums with a thirst. Got back to my hotel, nice little apartment I had in South Kensington. Opened I'd specifically boosted them out with a fridge. Put my beers in the fridge earlier. Went there and realised I'd left the fridge door open. So yeah, had 2 cans of self-loathing while I read the newspapers that night before going to bed. So anyway, hopefully somewhere on Saturday night there's a cool beer waiting for me after Newcastle Fulham. And I think it'd be a great game. Where Newcastle are, there's always a story, there's always interest, there's always intrigue, and there's always myself and Selby sticking some Bayern Munich gloves. So please hit like, subscribe, links below through to all our Daily Mail stories as well, a lot from today. So yeah, see you soon, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.